As we talk about the slave trade, it is important to understand that the information we have is actually very accurate. Some information is definitely missing, but there is a lot that we can find out from the records of the slaving ships themselves. The reason, of course, that the slavers kept such impeccable records has to do with the fact that this was a business to them. This was how they made money. They did not feel remorse when conducting this business, and if they did, it was shoved aside as profit was more important. When historians research the slave trade, they have to look at a lot of data to make their conclusions. That's what we're doing with this activity. You're figuring out how you'd really find this information and make conclusions based on such data. In order to do that, we're going to use this website, the Voyages database, which is a database of every slaving voyage we have on record. First, go to www.slavevoyages.org, as you can see up here at the top. Once you're there, we'll be looking at two parts of the website, the Search the Voyages database and the Examine Estimates of the Slave Trade portions. In order to access this page, you can always just click on Voyages icon at the upper left-hand corner. Or to get to the different parts of the website, you can just use these tabs across the top. So let's begin by clicking on Search the Voyages database, or Voyages database up here. Once you're in this portion of the website, you can see on the left-hand side a column of variables. This is what you use to narrow your search. So let's look at the various variables you can use to search the database. You can search by year, from the first recorded voyage in 1514 to the last official voyage in 1866. You can also search by what nation is sailing the ship, its name, or its owners. In this one, ship nation owners. Next, in voyage outcome, you have three different variables. You can search by what happened. For example, what's the outcome of the voyage for the slaves, for the owners, and was there any African rebellion or resistance on that voyage? Next, you look at the voyage itinerary. Where did the voyage begin? Where did they buy slaves? Where did they land? And where did the actual voyage of the boat itself end? These are going to be important to this particular activity. You can also search by the year arrived with slaves, so which year, just 1 year, are you looking instead of a date range like up top. You can also search by captain and crew. Not that you would probably know this at this point, but you could search by captain's name, who's on the crew when it starts, if there's any crew deaths during the voyage on the captain and crew. This one's going to be pretty important, the slave numbers. This one has two variables, the total slaves embarked, how many got on the boat at the beginning, and the total slaves disembarked, how many got off at the end. So you can obviously tell some mortality within there as well. This one also has a decent amount of information, the slave characteristics. How many were men, women, boys, girls, male, children, and then of course also the mortality rate. And then this one you won't necessarily need to use. These categories are what you will utilize when attempting to make a query or a search on this database. So we're going to do one as a class. We want to answer the question, in which year did the most slaves arrive in Barbados? So our best bet is to search by selecting a variable from the side. Under the voyage itinerary, let's select place where voyage ended and pick Barbados. So we're going to select. These little red arrows over here give us an indication of an expansion, right? So you can pick something more specific. So we know Barbados is in the Caribbean, and there it is. So we're going to select it, and we say OK. So this is in our current query, so we've selected Barbados here. So once we hit the search button, then it will take it a minute, obviously with the spinning wheel, to give us a new one. So instead of having 35,000 results, we now have 10. So that's a significantly less number to deal with when we're trying to figure out what we want. We can narrow it further by refining it by another search though. So we want the year in which the most slaves arrived in Barbados, so let's look at the disembarkation number. So go ahead and click on total slaves disembarked. And then we can try to narrow it. So we added a new query down here, and we want to say it's at least, let's say, 100 slaves. And then we'll hit the little search button, and then it should narrow our results even further. Might take it a minute. Okay, so now we're down to 6 voyages instead of 10, which is nice. Okay, so it looks like we've got a couple voyages for 1711, so this might be the year we want. If we click on a specific voyage, we get more specific information for that particular voyage. So this is the ship the Crow, so we can kind of scroll down and see, okay, who's sending it? It's from the Gold Coast, but that's not what we want. We don't want the year it arrived with slaves. We want, aha, total slaves disembarked, so 133. Okay, so that's 133. Let's look at the last one. Let's go down to this one. We'll take a look at this one, see how many slaves in 1711 for this one. 152. And then the last one for 1711. So our goal is to see if these three boats combined are more than another voyage from the other years. So this one's got 108. So 133 plus 152 and 108 added together makes it 393. So we just need to see if these ones had 393, which I doubt. But we'll check. Here we go, disembarked 186. All right. Nope, not that one. That one doesn't beat it. Let's check 1712. All right, 111 doesn't beat it. And 113, or 713, let's see. 107, yep, so the year that had the most slaves disembarked was 1711. So that's how we got our answer, by using the various queries on the side and using basic variables to narrow down to answer our question. If you ever want to start over, you can just hit New Query down here, and then it'll erase it, and you'll go back to having all of the data at the same time. So if we decide we want to do another one, we can do the question, what country had the boat that disembarked the most slaves during the slave trade? So we want to go to the disembarked portion of the search. Then we want to make it, we want a lot of slaves on this boat to find out. So we want at least, let's try 500. And we'll hit search. Okay, we've still got 1,918 results. Okay, it's got to be more than that. Let's try 1,000. Oh, 34. So let's try 1,500 because we want it to be more narrow because it'll take us a while to comb through 34 results. Okay, down to 4. So at this point we can kind of see, all right, if we click on these 4 voyages, we'll find the one with the most. So this one had 1607, right here. Second voyage down has 1,500. Third voyage down has 1,500. So number 1 is winning at this moment. So this one's 1,700. So this was the most. So now let's scroll back up and find out what flag this was under. It's the Memphis, and it's the United States of America. So that's our answer. The country that sailed that ship is the USA. There you go. So that's how we work this database. And again, if you ever need to go back or access a different portion of the website, you just hit the Voyages piece or this. And if we ever need to clear, we just say New Query. And that'll erase all of the variables and you'll get a new one. It'll go back to the beginning. The other portion of the website that we're going to look at is actually the estimates. So if you want to go back to the beginning, you can hit Examine Estimates of the Slave Trade, and it's done similarly. You just have a different way of looking at the variables. The website's a little slow at the moment, so it might take it a second to load that piece. So you can see this one has a few less variables, right? Because you can search by flag, embarkation and debarkation, if you're looking for different slaves. And this one appears more of as a graph. So this one's fairly a little bit easier maybe than the other one, which is why we do it second. Because once you figure out how to do the other one, this is pretty easy. So if we want to say, you know, if I want to only show data from, you know, the, say, second half, you know, kind of end of the slave trade, then we'll change the selection and see what happens. You could set your table differently, right? So we're just seeing the numbers for later, right? With the years in 25-year periods, or maybe I want them in 100-year periods. then I can show that differently. So this is for the second portion of that, but this one's quite a bit easier to navigate, so I won't go into detail on how to do this. The queries are a lot easier because there's not as many variables for you to choose from. But this is how to do the backside of that worksheet, is using the estimates. And then, of course, the estimates are interesting because you can tell on the table, even if we go back to 1501, all of the countries and the number of slaves they shipped throughout the whole thing, which is kind of obviously morbid, but also vastly interesting to be able to see it up against other nations and see who had the most over time. So this is how you use the website. Obviously you can look at this a couple different times if you're a little concerned over how to find the information, especially if you're gone. But overall, it's not too bad of a website to use. But this can also give you a great insight into what historians actually have to look at to make these conclusions that end up in your textbook. Good luck!